Hi guys, thanks for tuning in to another video on ForgottenWeapons.com. I'm Ian McCollum and I am here today at the Rock Island Auction Company taking a look at some of the guns that they are going to be selling in their May of 2017 premiere auction. Specifically today we're taking a look at this somewhat nondescript little wood-stocked carbine, because this actually has a really interesting place in firearms development history. This is a self-loading carbine manufactured or designed by a guy named Adolf Furrer. Furrer, F-U-R-R-E-R. So Swiss designer, and he ran the WF Bern factory from 1921 until 1940. He was responsible for a whole bunch of different gun designs, including the Swiss LMG-25, which is a toggle-locked 7.5mm light machine gun that the Swiss adopted, as well as the 41/44 toggle-locked submachine gun. He really liked toggles. This, however, is not a toggle-locked action, but what it is a very early experiment with intermediate size cartridges, which is unusual. This dates to about 1921, and it is one of 5 prototype cavalry carbines that he manufactured. Unfortunately, the project didn't go anywhere. This would develop from this into some more traditional looking select fire, well, you might say assault rifles. But this very first design is a really interesting one because it doesn't use a box magazine. It actually has a tube magazine under the barrel and a very much like a King's patent loading gate. Remember that the Swiss were the first country to adopt a repeating bolt action rifle. It was the Vetterli, and it used a tube magazine under the barrel. So this was well understood technology at the time. This was a military concept that the Swiss were familiar with. And Furrer took that for one of his very first self-loading carbine ideas. Now the cartridge that this uses is a 7.65 by 27 cartridge. It's got a very steep shoulder. Honestly, kind of looks a lot like the German 8mm Kurz that would come many years later. From that 7.65 by 27, they also developed a 7.65 by 35 cartridge, which was slightly longer. And both of these cartridges were initially developed with round-nosed jacketed bullets, and as development progressed into more traditional looking guns with box magazines, they would start using spitzer, pointed spitzer bullets. But in a tube magazine, you really don't want that. You want something round-nosed, so that's what was used. What I find really interesting about this is it's this cool blending of 19th and 20th century rifle ideas and designs. Because on the one hand, you've got this bleeding edge, intermediate length, not bigger than a pistol, but smaller than a rifle cartridge. But you're putting it into a tube-fed gun that you're topping off on the fly. So you can, just like a lever-action rifle, you can fire a couple of rounds, stuff a couple more in the tube magazine to top it up. You've got basically cowboy tactics with an assault rifle. Really interesting little gun. Why don't we go ahead and take a closer look at it? There's not a whole lot I can show you, but there is a bit. So here's the main working bit of the gun. There are no markings on it, just these 2 numeral 5s on the receiver and the end cap. And we can get a hint for how it works by looking at this. When you see all of that striated wear, that tells you that the barrel is moving. So this is actually a long recoil action rifle, which makes it even more interesting with the tube magazine. We have the magazine right down here. You can see that this thing opens up just like a typical lever action cowboy style rifle. I did make an attempt at taking this apart and was quickly frightened off. The letter that comes with this from the Bern factory specifically says it is, quote, very, very difficult to reassemble. And I'm not exactly sure how to get it out of the stock without damaging the magazine tube, so I'm not even going to try. For example, if you look at this, that tiny little sliver of wood is really going to be fragile, so I don't want to break anything, so we're going to leave this in its assembled state. But we can still look at some interesting elements. Now I took the cross pin out here so that we can take the nose cap off. You can see the front of the tube magazine down here in the stock. And then the barrel, of course. There is no front sight on the gun. It is just a prototype. But I can push the barrel back. All All right, this is a difficult gun to demonstrate because it is long recoil and has some pretty heavy springs in it. But when you fire, this is going to cycle substantially backwards. So all the way back like that. When it gets all the way to the rear, in theory, the bolt will lock open. It doesn't want to do that dry cycling, and honestly, I don't know exactly why. Might have to do with there not actually being any cartridges in it. But once it's all the way to the back, we have this cocking indicator, which tells me the gun's ready to fire. And in order to dry cycle it, I have to drop that, and then I can pull the bolt back. Now, normally, the barrel would push the bolt back to this position, but once it's here, you can see the elevator right there in the action. That elevator slides up and down. It's going to have a cartridge from the tube magazine slide into the elevator at the bottom. It then pops up when the action cycles, and when you let the bolt forward, the bolt right there is going to hit the back of that cartridge and start to push it forward into the chamber right up in here. As it does so, the edges of the bolt are pushing on those angled surfaces of the elevator, and they're going to go ahead and push the elevator back down. Now, this is a little sticky, being an old prototype, and in order to get it to close, I have to just let go of the bolt handle, and then it will cycle correctly. I can't do it slowly or it will stick. This is a bolt release, so if you have the gun locked open, you can use that to release it and close it. Without taking this apart, and that is something that I am a little too leery to do, I don't know exactly what the locking mechanism is. We know the action is long recoil. The locking is going to have something to do with this charging handle, which does, this is unlocked and that's locked. So there's a pivoting block or a sliding block of some sort, I suspect, in there. But that will remain a mystery for the time being. Suffice to say, when you pull it back, it's unlocked. When you push it forward, the bolt is locked into the barrel. Furrer's experimental work with all of these intermediate length cartridges ultimately didn't go anywhere, although he did develop a bunch of prototypes following these. And it wouldn't actually be until 1946, at the end of World War II, that the Swiss would come back and take a closer look at this cartridge and continue to experiment with it. Even then, they ended up retaining the 7.5 rifle cartridge instead, but there's another batch of really interesting experimental guns from the post-World War II period. So if you happen to represent, say, one of the museums that would like to have one of these rifles, or a private collector who would like to have this particular rifle, make sure to take a look at the description text below. You'll find a link there to Rock Island's catalog page for this piece. You can take a look at the provenance, the letter that describes, from Bern describing what it is, and as well as Rock Island's pictures and description. If you're interested, you can place a bid at the auction or through their website. Thanks for watching.